So hello everyone. Today we are going to learn about this topic classification of complex numbers. Complex numbers are classified into three different parts, three different types. What is the first type? First type is purely imaginary complex number. Purely imaginary complex number. Purely imaginary complex number. Next one is purely real complex number. And the next part is imaginary complex number. Imaginary complex number. And next, what is purely imaginary complex number? Purely, what is a complex number? First of all, a complex number is denoted by a or x plus iota y. X plus iota y. Next, x is known as the real part, y is known as the imaginary part. What they say, purely imaginary complex number. In purely imaginary complex number, the real part, which is x here, in this case, x will be equal to 0. So this complex number will be in the form of z is equal to iota y because x is 0. For example, if we will see, example will be z is equals to 3 iota, z is equals to 5 iota, and so on. All these are known as purely imaginary complex number. Now if we will see purely real complex number. Purely real complex number, purely real means only x will be there, y will be 0. In this case, imaginary part will be 0 and the complex number will be in the form of z is equals to. For example, z is equals to 3, z is equals to 7. These are purely imaginary complex. These are the examples of purely. These are the examples of purely. Now come to imaginary complex number. What are imaginary complex number? Imaginary complex number will have a non-zero imaginary part. That means y will not be equal to 0. X can be 0, it cannot be 0, but y will not be equal to 0. For example, z is equals to 3 iota, z is equals to 5 plus root 3 iota, and so on. So now next, if we will see in the complex plane, if we see in the complex plane, this horizontal axis represents the real axis, and this vertical axis represents the imaginary axis. In the case of purely imaginary complex number, tell me where this purely imaginary complex number will lie in this complex plane. This purely imaginary complex number will lie on the imaginary axis. This 3 iota will lie somewhere here, 0 comma 3. 5 iota will lie somewhere here. Change the color. 5 iota will lie somewhere here, 0 comma 5. If I see about real complex number, purely real complex number, it will lie on 3 will lie somewhere here, 3 comma 0. Next, 7 will lie somewhere here, 7 comma 0 on the real axis. So we can write in purely imaginary complex number that it will lie on imaginary axis, or you can say y axis. We can write here purely in real complex number that it will lie on real axis or x axis. Now for imaginary complex number, see what are imaginary complex number? Once again I repeat, for this the imaginary part will be non-zero. That means imaginary complex number consists of all purely imaginary complex number. Imaginary complex number consists of all purely imaginary complex number. Why? Because you can see here 3 iota is also imaginary complex number, 5 iota is also imaginary complex number because imaginary part is not zero. Okay. And the real part can be 0, cannot be 0. May or may not be 0. Now, so where it will lie? It can lie anywhere on the complex plane. It can lie anywhere on the complex plane, but it can't lie on the real axis. It can't lie on the real axis. It can lie on anywhere on the because the imaginary part is non-zero. So it will lie anywhere in complex plane except except on x-axis. Except on x-axis. Now next. See. Now next we'll talk about zero. Suppose see one complex number. Suppose I have written a complex number as z is equals to 0 plus 0 iota. Now tell me whether this is a purely imaginary, purely real, or just imaginary complex number. What is the condition for purely real complex number? What is the condition for purely imaginary complex number? And what is the condition for just imaginary complex number? See, the condition for purely real complex number was that real parts, sorry, imaginary parts, your imaginary part is zero, so it is a purely real complex number. Next, what is the condition for purely imaginary complex number? That real part should be zero. Here in this complex number, we can say this satisfying the condition of purely also. But what was the condition for imaginary complex number? Imaginary complex number condition was the imaginary parts. But here we clearly we can see that imaginary part is zero. So it is not imaginary complex number. So what we can write? We can write that z is equals to 0 plus 0 iota is the only complex number which is purely real as well as purely imaginary. Purely imaginary. Now next, one more important point. That what was the condition for purely imaginary complex number and imaginary complex number? The condition for purely imaginary complex number was the real part will be zero. And what is the condition for imaginary complex number? That imaginary part will not be equal to zero. The real part can be zero, and the real part can't be zero. Both conditions are true. In the case of imaginary complex number, only the condition is that the imaginary part should be non-zero. So now, from here we can say that in purely complex numbers, the imaginary part will be non-zero, except in this case. Except in this case, the imaginary part will not be zero. And here also imaginary part is non-zero. We can say that all purely imaginary complex number are pure are imaginary complex number. But converse is not true. Converse is not true. We'll look into this with some example. With one example, suppose I write one example as z is equals to 3 iota. This is purely imaginary complex number as it is satisfying the condition because the imaginary part it is imaginary complex number. But if I will take one number as z is 5 plus 3 iota, 5 plus 3 iota, it is purely imaginary complex number or not? It is not purely imaginary complex. But if I will see, but if I will see 5 plus 3 iota, it is imaginary complex number or not? Yes, it is imaginary complex number.